MG Rod back with you, and we're back on the MGA Fastback again. So since the last video, I went ahead and got this one little bracket here put in, and all of the captive nuts that I have. I still got to get a couple more put in. But what we're going to do today, we're going to start out by getting this packing shelf out of here. What I need to do, obviously, is extend it back to where the window is going to be here. But also, this is going to be running 6-inch wide wheels, not the original 4s. So this isn't going to be wide enough for a spare tire. So we're actually going to raise this up a little bit and make a bigger hole. Let's get going. So just for good measure, I went ahead and tacked in an X-brace here real quick, because once we take this out, it's going to take some strength out of this. Plus, the next thing, I might end up cutting some of the roof out here, and we might want that X-brace in there. So I'm going to go ahead and run a wire wheel across here, identify all of the spot welds. I'll cut this away, and then I'll grind on all this to peel that away without damaging the piece underneath. So there's two ways I can deal with these spot welds. One is you can take a drill bit, like something like a 5/16, something that's bigger than a spot weld, and you can drill into them part way. Or you can literally just take a grinder and grind away at each one of them and just try to gauge only going through the thickness of the first piece of metal. And you can actually watch the heat ring right around it and tell when you're getting there, if you know what you're looking for. And then we can just take a chisel and go along the edge of it and peel it off. I might try a little bit of both. Start out with the drill bit, but these welds eat drill bits up. And you go through a lot of them if you got a lot of spot welds to do, because it's really hard in those. And you got to keep using WD-40 or something else to lubricate this and keep it cool. All right, so initially I wasn't quite aggressive enough with the grinding, but I'd rather start out not going quite far enough initially and then figuring out how far is the right amount. But you can see, if you hit the right amount, you can actually peel that off fairly easily with little to no damage to the other panel. And we just need to go back and clean up some of these little spots here that are still a little on the high side. And then we can move on to figuring out where I want to cut this to make it taller. So after trying a couple different ways of laying this out here, I think I got something that's going to work. Now this hole is not exactly square. It's wider at the bottom than it is at the top, which means if I want this to be level to cut across here, I can't just come off this with a square. So I had to come off this top edge and go down. And I made this distance, I'm going to cut across here, down, and then across. Do a step. That way I can lift this up to where I want it, clamp this together, and tack it, and then I can just fill in a strip here and then fill in a strip here. Makes it a lot easier to put it back together later. All right, so now that I got that cut out, I reclamped it back on here, and I've tried a couple different positions, and I'm not getting out of it quite what I was hoping to get. Because once I get the space I'm looking for here, then this just seems too high when you set the window in place there. So, small change of plans here. Since I'm not going to need these brackets for the starting handle anyway, I'm going to get rid of these. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the top of this off and rebend a new flange to drop the top of this down 1 inch. And then rebend these flanges from here to there. And then I'll fill this in, and then I'll bring this up to where I really wanted this space here. And that'd be a good compromise. Well, I'm happier with that. I think that looks a whole lot better than it did before. And it gives me a full 1.5 inches higher here, while only actually being a 1/2 inch higher here than original. So I think that's going to work for me. Before I do any more reconstruction of this, I want to come in here and cut some of this inner structure here. There is some 14 gauge in here that whoever did the modifications on this originally had put in here, and I want to cut some of this out here and then get rid of these pieces sticking out here on both sides. Give me some more room to work, and give me a chance to kind of figure out how I'm going to do my inner structure later too. So now I'm ready to tack this thing in place. Since we're making this opening 1.5 inches taller, my filler pieces here are actually 1 9/16, and that's because the cutoff wheels I'm using are 1/16 of an inch thick, so you have to add that to your 1.5 inch dimension to actually keep this 1.5 inches taller. And also the thickness of that is missing here on both sides. Now when we weld that, I've got a spoon, copper spoon I can put behind that for when I'm welding those gaps. Now, it does make for a little wonky look here at the moment, but I can either live with that, or once I get some welding done in here, I can go in there with a hammer and dolly and adjust that edge to make it look straighter. Now, in this case here, once we put a spare tire cover over it and everything, you're not really going to see it anyway, but knowing me, I'll probably go in there and straighten that out a little bit and make it look a little better. All right, so I got this piece all tacked together now, and to put these pieces in, basically all I did was just take a strip of metal like this and just put it behind there, figure out the angle against my wheel well, and then pretty much just trace it out, cut it to fit. And I did go ahead and bend a flange down here so I can spot weld that right here to the inner fender well, and I attached it here to help keep this flange nice and straight. I'm probably also going to put, once this is actually finished, shaped properly, and the lid fits, might put something down here yet too, because I want to, since I'm going to be hand forming all this stuff and then going up over here, I want to make sure I keep this nice and straight, so I'm making sure to attach it in several places so it doesn't do that on me. So the next thing, I'll be looking at the packing shelf here up to the window, getting it attached to where the window frame is going to be, and cutting some of this roof out here, and then I can start making the piece of infrastructure that goes across to strengthen the top of the window frame. And I went ahead and put the whole exoskeleton back on there and worked even more on the corners of the window opening because they just were not following the roof line well enough. And I finally got that where I think I'm happy with it now. So I guess go ahead and chop a chunk of this roof out here to get it out of the way. And then we'll start looking at the rest of it. I was thinking about leaving this piece in there at first, but then I realized that that's my real problem right now. This is in the way for me to be able to actually make any kind of infrastructure around the rear window. So out it came. So in order to try to establish my packing shelf, I just found a piece of 16 gauge I had laying here that was roughly a size that would work for me to figure it out. Set it in here and got it at a nominal measurement that I thought would work from the front panel. And then I put these angle irons in here and got this at where this is level with the rocker panels. Figure that's probably a good place to put it. And now I can take this out and work on putting and building a pattern out of cardboard across here to make my back piece here. So now I got a little bit of cardboard in here. All I gotta do now is draw a line across here. And of course I already put a crease here, but then I can draw a line across the back side here too, because I actually have some marks on the back side here and here that I'm going to transfer down. And here, that tells me where I want it to stop here and where I want it to stop down here. And that's kind of a guess on what I think it's going to take for me to get what I want, because I still don't know about the inner structure in here yet, so I'm trying to guesstimate what's going to work for working that out later and being able to add to it if I need to. So now that I got my piece cut out, I'll transfer this to a piece of metal, and then I'll add some along this whole top for a flange that'll bend forward to spot weld onto this, and then a flange across the bottom to tip forward to actually hold that shelf. So now we got a flange we want to bend here, but the flange isn't straight. Now there's a couple ways we can tackle this, and one of the things I'm going to try here is I got this old, I forget what they actually call this thing now, but it's not actually the right one for doing this, because this is rounded off, not a straight taper there. So I can only tip so far, and then I'll have to finish the rest of it by hand. Because this is actually made as one of a series of tools for wire edging, like buckets and stuff like that, which I have successfully used this to wire edge a fender on a Morgan before. I don't remember the process anymore because it's been a long time and I haven't used this very much, but let's give it a shot, see what we can make happen. So basically we want to follow the edge, very edge of this, with the very edge of this top die while holding pressure up on it. And that'll start tipping the flange and give me a nice line to work with. You don't want to go too far first time. You're not going to get much of a tip on it the first time around. And you can set there's a fence here you can set up. But I find with the fence being on the opposite side of where I'm standing to be a problem for me. So I just am not using it. Plus, I'm not sure my flange is cut accurately enough to give me the line I'm looking for. So we do this a couple of times. Take it a little bit further each time until we get to the point where we're hitting this, and then I'll have to finish it by hand. So now that we've got this as far as I can realistically tip that in that, I'll take glass pliers now, and I'll start working this edge here. We'll start here and just work our way up and follow that edge and keep going all the way around there until I get it up to 90. Now, of course, you can see now this is no longer straight, but I knew it was going to do that, and we got a fix for that. That's the shrinker. So once this is bent 90, then we can shrink this back straight. All right, so you see we got the rough fit pretty close now. I have to play with the angle of this flange to get this thing to sit right down here where I want it. And then we still got to do a little bit of shrinking and stretching on this to get it to match the window line. But it's close.